Welcome, and we're going to call this special meeting to order on Tuesday, February 14th, Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. And now this is a special meeting, and we don't do some of the things that we normally do when we have our regular meetings on the first Tuesday and the third Tuesday. We don't have the oral communications from the public on anything that is not on the agenda, and we don't have staff reports. This meeting is specifically to take care of business that we ordinarily don't have the time for or would have to make the time for on our other two meetings. And they can be study sessions, they can be trainings, they could be overflow type of subjects, of agenda items that we just don't want to have a long meeting for on the first meeting or the third meeting. So just so you know, it's a little bit different from what we've done. So every second Tuesday of every month will be a special meeting, and it will be done accordingly. So with that, I think we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Ryan Campbell, would you lead us? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you very much. And but in keeping with what I've been doing as your new board chair, I do try to set the tone for us being a community that cares about each other, and we are respectful and civil, of course, but I'm adding an element of kindness into it. And in keeping with that, I read a quote from some famous person that you've probably heard of to kind of set the tone for the meeting. And today, I have chosen one from Ray Bradbury from Fahrenheit 451. We cannot tell the precise moment when friendship is formed. As in filling a vessel, drop by drop, there is at last a drop which makes it run over. So in a series of kindnesses, there is at last one which makes the heart run over. All right. And before I have our clerk read the first agenda item, I was just told before taking my seat up here that our closed session item has been pulled. So if you are here for the closed session, that for some reason has been pulled, so we will not be going into closed session today at all. All right. Tanya, would you please read the first agenda item?
Good morning. Item 1, under Community Development Department Director Quincy Yaley, discussion and board direction on housing and updating the housing element position and funding for a consultant to assist with updating the housing element.
And I think we have Quincy and Rachel here to give us a presentation.
Good morning. Quincy Yaley, Community Development Director, and I'm joined by Rachel Bell, who is our business manager, but also plays a role in our housing programs here at the county. So today I'm going to go over the housing development specialist position that was created in the last budget, then talk a little bit about how housing tasks are assigned at the county, talk about some of the difficulty we're having recruiting, and some potential ideas on how we can move forward with assisting housing developers or housing production in the county. And at the end of this item, really looking for direction from your board on how you would like to proceed, specifically in terms of funding and staffing for the position. So in 2022, your board created and funded a housing development specialist job title and classification. And the idea at that time was that this would be a specialized position that would be kind of a hand holder for housing developers. They would research and promote housing policies here in the county. They would be the knower of all state housing laws, which are consistently changing and being updated and are very difficult to navigate, and would just be a general resource for housing policy production here in the county. And in your staff report, I included a graphic that really shows what is not my graphic, but and not my term, but the housing ladder, which talks about the different types of housing that are typically available in a community. And I've highlighted the areas that the Community Development Department typically works on. I say typically because we often get pulled into interdisciplinary teams on a number of housing issues, but our primary responsibilities are highlighted above, or highlighted on that chart. So at the end of last year, some of our staff met together with the county administrator and our homeless service coordinator to discuss this position and how the position and or something like it could best serve the housing categories in the county. And so in that meeting, it became clear that one thing we could do for your board was to highlight what the different type of work is that we do, so that your board would understand and know where you wanted to put sort of the resources and the funding dollars of the housing specialist position. So I'll start with our county administrative office, Michael Roberson, which is our homeless service coordinators, and that is also on our housing ladder, but typically it's more emergency, supportive, transitional. It's housing for folks who are in crisis, who need housing immediately, and it really focuses on bringing those resources to those areas. We do work collaboratively on a number of projects, but Mr. Roberson is the primary go-to for things like following the plan to combat homelessness, and he works really closely with our HHSA, our Health and Human Services Agency, on spending dollars that they pull down for housing programs. Then you have the Community Development Department, which we generally are going to work on applications that take longer to process and are going to provide housing for a longer duration of time. So not for those individuals who are in crisis, but for those who are looking either for sale housing or rental housing. And that's typically myself, Dave Ruby, our planning manager, and Natalie Rizzi, our senior planner. And then we have Rachel Bell, who is our business manager, who really works on our home program. These are dollars that come in to either fund larger projects that are affordable housing projects, like our Hidden Meadows Terrace project, or they do home loans for single-family homes, first-time home buyers, and housing rehab. So those are really three different distinct types of support that the county provides for housing programs. And those just encompass the three of us. There's a whole entity in Health and Human Services Agency that also works more in that sort of housing crisis realm for those who need emergency housing or housing very quickly and possibly for a shorter period of time. So we've been interviewing, the Community Development Department's been interviewing for the Housing Development Specialist. We've had just a few applications be submitted and have struggled to find a candidate that meets the qualifications and that would be a fit for this position, because not only are there just minimum qualifications, but this individual will be out in the community working with our businesses, working with housing developers, really to promote, learn and promote housing policy. So it really will take a unique set of skills to be able to handle both sort of the behind the scenes and the public facing side of what we had envisioned this position to do. Enter in, as we're recruiting for the housing development specialist, then the time also now is coming in where the county is going to be updating our housing element. This is a chapter in our general plan. It's one of the 5 mandated chapters that the state of California requires us to do. And it's the only chapter in our general plan that has to be certified or blessed by the Housing and Community Development Department at the state of California. And so we're embarking on updating that housing element, which will include a site analysis where we go around and we look at different potential sites for housing. We do that in conjunction with the colors on the land use map that we already have that were recently done. So we are trying not to reinvent the wheel, but we're sort of vetting out those places where we said housing should go. And then it also is going to be an in-depth review of local housing policy and how those are consistent with state housing law and any changes that we need to make here at the local level to make sure that we are being consistent with those state laws. And so we sort of have this point now where we're coming together, where we're having difficulty recruiting for our housing specialists, but we have a very specific task that needs to be done that often and typically is prepared by a technical expert, a consultant. And so when we're looking at the cards on the table in conjunction with the CAO's office, my office, and Mr. Roberson, we're kind of going, okay, what do we do next? We're having difficulty recruiting for this position. We know we have a task that needs to be completed on a specific timeline. And so do we continue to recruit and wait for this person so that they can work on that housing element, or should we take a different approach? And so we have a couple of recommendations for your consideration today. One would be that to use the salary savings from basically the beginning of this fiscal year till now-ish, when we would go into a contract, and put those funds towards hiring a technical expert to embark on preparing our housing element. So typically when we don't spend those salary dollars, those would go into like what we would call salary savings. And sometimes in a department, we'll move those around into different tasks in the budget, or they would go to fund balance. So one of the things to consider is using the salary savings to hire a consultant. We have released an RFP in the event that your board wants to go down that route. So we did get started on that, and the responses are due in a couple of weeks. And so if that was the direction your board would go, we would continue with that process. Another recommendation is that we do have some grant funds from what we call the LEAP and the REAP grant. Your board has talked about those in the past, but those are local, early action planning and regional early action planning grants. And so we've put a request into the state to reposition those funds towards the housing element consultant as well. So we would take salary savings and those remaining funds, about, I'm gonna get them there. $80,000. So we would essentially have close to about $150,000 between salary savings and the grant funds that we could put towards the housing consultant that is basically money budgeted in CDD's budget right now. We could continue to recruit for the housing development specialist position while those efforts are ongoing, or we could change gears and look towards hiring more of a generalist, someone like a senior planner, so someone who's going to have approximately 5 years of experience in the land use and planning field. They could be in a local agency, or they could come from consulting, and that we could hire a generalist but assign them essentially the housing specialist duties. And so they would come in with some experience, but we'd have a bigger pool of potential employees to pull from, rather than a narrow pool of employees just focused on, who may have experience just focused on housing. So let me think if there's anything else I wanted to talk about. I think, along with the housing element and, sort of the efforts that our department is making in the world of housing and housing policy, the housing element is a great opportunity for the county, our department, to work with the public in developing what is that vision for housing in the county. And an entity that has been working, I think, really well that I've been participating in is a public-private partnership, the Housing Collaborative, which some of the folks in the room here have participated in, where we're bringing together a lot of government, tribal, business, and other interested stakeholders to the table. And that process seems to be working really well in lieu of having having just a public group, like a government group, where folks are invited to just participate in one venue. The Housing Collaborative seems to be a little bit more accessible than some of our past efforts through our committees that we've had. And so our department, in working on the housing element, really no matter what direction your board takes, would be using the Housing Collaborative as well as calling together an executive team or a task force team to work on the housing element and look at housing policies specifically related to the housing element. So I think that was all I wanted to cover this morning. And again, we're looking, the reason we're here, one is to explain the different types of housing staff in the county and give you a synopsis of sort of what we've been doing since the housing specialist position was created, and then provide some options for your discussion about how to move forward. The status quo of doing nothing would just essentially be we'd continue to recruit for a housing development specialist, and then we'd come to your board at some point to possibly in the next fiscal year to allocate funds for the housing consultant if we didn't have a specialist on board at that time. So I think that is all, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
All right, great. Thank you for that presentation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the board to ask clarifying questions to make sure they understand the presentation and withhold comments, because we're going to go to the public first to hear their comments on this presentation, and then we'll come back to the board for final comments before giving our opinions about which way we should go. Okay? So, do any board members? Yeah, David. Supervisor Goldenberg.
So one question I have on the recommendation is that requesting the Board of Supervisors provide direction, county staff, on the housing development specialist position and funding for a consultant to assist specifically with the housing element. How long do you anticipate that effort would take? Because, I just need to have that.
Great question.
Yeah.
The housing element is required to be certified by the state of California next summer. So the housing element consultant would come on board and would work furiously and fiercely to meet that deadline. A county can go past that deadline, and there's no housing element police that show up if we're not certified by next summer. But that does put the county in a position where we might have some trouble obtaining grants. So we would be working towards that next summer deadline to get our housing elements certified.
So just a quick follow-up on that. When you state next summer, can you be a little more definitive?
I think it's June 30th. June 30th.
Okay. Thank you.
2024. And was that it?
2024. June 30th, 2024.
Okay, Supervisor Campbell, you had a question.
Well, I'm sorry, you say June 30th, 2024.
She said next summer, not this summer.
Okay. We'll discuss after. Thank you.
That was it, right? Okay, Supervisor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Quincy. Good description of the situation, and I think a good option for getting somebody on the ground focusing on housing issues. But I just kind of to clarify for me, since I'm very much not aware of how you hire for these types of positions or what types of qualifications are necessary. So we've been having trouble finding somebody that to hire to be the housing specialist. And so by having a senior planner who's focused on housing needs, are we looking for a position that has lower qualifications, or what is the difference, I guess, for somebody that doesn't understand these things, which I certainly don't? What is the difference between a housing specialist and a senior planner with a housing focus?
First of all, a housing development specialist job title can mean a variety of things. So I think part of I'll get to your question in a second, but part of the challenge of recruiting is that if you just look at the title and you look where it's going and you don't read any further, it's easy to discount that if you are in the field of planning. So the backgrounds are going to be similar. A senior planner can have more of an environmental background, or they can have more of a geography or an environmental background, where in the housing specialist position, it really is limited to experience in housing. So our senior planner is going to be able to come in with a broader range of experience that we could count as meeting the minimum qualifications versus just someone who's limited to housing. So we would be able to get someone who has experience in other types of policy, but they would be, senior planner is a title that is more familiar to those in the field. And so even if you were someone who was interested in housing or just even community development, if you see the title senior planner, I'm going to be more likely to click on it than someone who sees a housing development specialist title. It's just maybe too narrow of a niche for our county. So it's not dumbing down the position. I would consider them equivalent, but being able to pull from a bigger pool of potential employees.
Okay, so we're essentially, we're looking for the same set of skills, but we're casting a wider net. So, okay.
And with a name that's more familiar.
Okay.
It's for example, a number of years ago, we changed the title of a position from a planner to a land use technician and a land use coordinator. Mm-hmm. We sometimes do have trouble recruiting for those positions because the name is a little odd.
Okay.
So that's an example.
All right, and then my follow-up question on that is, so since we're considering freezing a position and just allocating the salary to another job description, are the salaries the same, or would it cost?
They are a little bit different.
What is the cost, the end cost for this? Is it going up or down?
The senior planner is a little, is slightly less per hour, $2 less an hour than the housing development specialist.
Okay.
So overall, there is a little bit of a savings by going wider.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Thank you.
All right, I see that Supervisor Kirk does not have any questions, nor do I, so we're going to go to the public now for any questions or comments about this agenda item. Come on up. I don't see any. I'm surprised. All right, so then we'll go back to the board for comments and any other types of. Supervisor Kirk, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I didn't have any clarifying questions, but I do have some questions. I wanted to wait for the public first. So I just wrote a little picture here, and I have a few questions I want to go through. They're not in any particular order. But it sounds to me, I mean, at the end of the day, Quincy, when I read this, it's specific about a housing development specialist position, right? But at the end of the day, it's about, my understanding is it's about really getting more housing on the market and planning, there's a housing site inventory. So when I think of this memo and I write down my thoughts, I kind of see three options. We have this looming deadline coming up, 2024, summer 2024, to get this housing element completed. So when it comes to your recommendation, if this is a tool that you need to achieve that and you need that position, then I support that. So that's one branch I see. The other branch I see is, and this goes back to a prior conversation, I think it was back in January, where our board was talking about lot size and inclusionary ordinance. Would this inventory, this housing element include, and help me bring back my thoughts on it, but we had given direction to potentially reach out to the state on that inclusionary ordinance to get it extended, and there was some discussion about fees. Is that going to be part of this study, or is that something that you're going to bring back to the board? Was it this month or maybe next month?
So the lot size modifications will be in our Title 17 update. That's where we'll change that and do the environmental review for that in the ordinance code. And then the inclusionary ordinance, if that can be extended just by simple resolution from your board, that will come back sooner. If it's a more in-depth change that would require a recertification of the housing element, we'll make the changes to that program while we're doing the housing element update.
So part of that, okay. But I remember there was conversation about us reaching out to the state, and I know it's not on the agenda, so I'm trying to be careful, but is that coming back to the board soon as far as if we've been able to reach out and get confirmation, or?
Yeah, it'll come back to the board so that you guys know which direction we're going to go.
Okay. And do we know when that is?
I don't have that
Because I'm just
information.
curious with the timeline of the summer
Yeah.
2024. Okay. And then the third branch, so I see 3 branches. The third branch is things, again, I keep wrapping this whole conversation around more housing, conversations about housing. I know, and again, this is a little off topic, but I'm curious how it might work with the housing inventory study that we're going to have completed by 2024. I know there was conversation the last couple of years about OpenGov and about permitting systems and about kind of connecting all these dots. And if we have all these things kind of going in the housing element direction and studies and whatnot, like I'm just curious specifically with OpenGov, where are we at with that, and will it tie into any of this moving forward?
So the housing element and OpenGov are on unrelated tracks and are not related to each other. To the extent that there could be a policy in the housing element that supports permit streamlining, which OpenGov is intended to do. So OpenGov is still in process. It's requiring some coordination between our fiscal department, our IT department. I know that the community development staff it's been every Friday we meet, and typically those are the folks in our building division meet probably 4 hours every week, about 4 to 5 hours every week, and are improving the workflows. So that the staff has spent hundreds of hours getting OpenGov workflows ready so that we can launch whenever OpenGov is ready. Once the staff is no longer spending hundreds of hours doing OpenGov, then they'll absorb capacity back to plan review and permit processing and things like that. So they're unrelated in that sort of sense, but in terms of the overall goal of increasing housing production in the county from this specific position, OpenGov does play is related to the housing development specialist position. And if there was a senior planner and we needed them to come in and help work on OpenGov, they certainly would do that.
Okay. I think I'll probably talk to you offline, but I kind of want to get an update where we are with OpenGov, because we've been talking about this for a couple of years. And with everything moving forward, I really want to make sure that, technology's got to be front and center moving forward. So I think, to answer your questions, to answer my questions, which you did, thank you very much. I think my comments are, obviously I don't want to keep repeating. If we can't hire the position and you feel like you can use this funding and freeze the position or however you need to do to bring that body, to get that scope of work. My only concern is consultants, and when we're doing housing up here, things are very different up here than obviously other regions. So I would just hope that we don't get any cookie cutting stuff, kind of like experience with the cap a little bit. So that would be just my only request as far as oversight. But I guess that's kind of what happens when you deal with consultants. So I think I will leave it at that for now.
That was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Supervisor Campbell.
I don't have any additional follow-up questions. Are you looking for?
Comments?
Okay. My comment is I think it's a sound recommendation. I was probably, I don't know, I would say I was probably the most hesitant to look into this just because of the cost was my concern, but I do see the purpose of it. I think the main thing to see is that, this is going to be a long-term investment in a very broad subject that is affecting the entire state. And so we'll need to be really consistent about staying on top of it and making sure that this, position is justified if we are going to spend the additional money. So that's the thing that I would want to make sure is that we continue to make sure that this isn't just becoming another planning position, that they truly are spending time. Not that we don't need other, planners in the county, but that they truly are spending time focusing on what we're talking about here, which is bringing in additional housing and streamlining this process. Because, I hear we do have this reputation of things are difficult to build in the county. I think a lot of that is based off of history, and I think a lot of the issues there have been addressed and are improved, but there are still a lot of problems, many of which come from the state level, and there's a lot of hoops that builders and developers and just even people that want to get permits for making improvements to their own home. And I really see that as a big hurdle, and if we have somebody to shepherd people through the process that knows all the ins and outs, that's where I see the real benefit of this. So, but overall, I do agree with the recommended action.
Thank you. Supervisor Goldenberg.
Yeah, so I've got questions and comments. Number one, when is the housing element due to be updated? Is there a specific date?
So our housing element is updated every 5 years. That is a cycle that the state of California has put us on. Different counties are on different cycles depending on their sizes. So ours is every 5 years. We last certified it in 2019, and so now we're due to update it again in 2024. And once we update it in 2024, then in the next 5 years, we'll update it. So the date within that 5 years changes. In 2019, I believe it was August, the end of August that we were certified by. This time they've moved it up to June.
Okay, so when we as a board initially authorized the position, for the housing specialist, I'm trying to recollect when did we do that action?
So that was in this year, the beginning of this year's fiscal budget. So that was in adopted budget.
Okay, so we absolutely need to do everything possible to increase housing in Tuolumne County. The position, my understanding when we authorized it, was to facilitate working towards that goal and to, have somebody actively involved in doing it. I realize that there's difficulty in recruiting the position. I am actually wondering whether or not we need to revisit the specifications of the position. Perhaps we were a little bit too high, thus could not get somebody to apply, basically. And, maybe we should take a fresh look at that. On the homeless side, that's certainly got a housing, perspective that needs to be addressed, but I don't think it's with this specific position. I'm honestly not in favor of going with the senior planner. I think we need to have this as a housing position as we as a board authorized to begin with. I'm not in favor of switching track at this time. Other than that, we can look at the, looking at the housing element and update that, but I would hope within your own staff that you have some capacity to look at updating that, because if we didn't have this position, you would have to have done it anyways, correct?
We would if we didn't have this position, we would still be asking for a consultant to do the task. We do not have the capacity or the technical expertise within our staff to do that. The state of HCD continually moves the goalposts and has made this round, the 7th cycle housing element update, very, very complicated. And so we would be asking your board for additional funds for a consultant.
Okay, so when I look at our, the document here, it says 100,000 to 300,000. That's a very wide spread. And, there's been a lot of concern on the public about how much money that the county spends on consultants. I'm not against hiring a consultant to get that work done. I think we've already achieved a fair amount of salary savings, right? So that we could use those funds to hire a consultant now, to facilitate working on that. But I don't want that to be a long-term, solution. I think we need to fill this position overall. So that's my comments.
When you're ready. Okay. I've got all sorts of notes in my margin, so this may be kind of in no particular order. Let's see. I want to start with the Housing Development Specialist position. This came about also at our Housing Collaborative that you mentioned. Those meetings took place last year in May and November, and like you stated, it was a public-private nonprofit partnership. Great array of folks across the board, all intent on seeing housing and pushing the housing challenge forward. And the Housing Development Specialist was very important to this collaborative. They saw it as a concierge of sorts. You mentioned that it would be a person that would work behind the scenes and also public facing. And we need to find, this is an expanded skill set from the planner position. So however we do it, we need to find somebody that has those skills, the soft skills and the hard skills, because we really need a champion for housing in our community. And I don't want to let the work of what our community has already done to push this ball forward lay flat. So I want to say that first and foremost. I am not opposed to hiring a consultant with the savings that you have mentioned from both salary savings and the LEAP and the REAP grants that will afford us to pay for a technical expert to do the housing element. We have to do it. If we don't have those skills in-house and don't have the capacity, I'm not against that. But what I'd like to see, and since it's so hard to find a housing development specialist, I'd like to see us working towards finding one. I know we haven't mentioned that at this meeting, but I know that this board has gotten rid of the Tuolumne County Planning Committee. And I've heard little bits and pieces from the community, okay, well, what's going to take its place? And I understand that you will be creating a housing advisory team for special things when needed, or the community can ask you to possibly form an advisory team around something. So I would like to call for a housing advisory team to be called. It's kind of like an ad hoc committee specifically to talk about how to market for this housing development specialist. It may take a while to create a good marketing plan and strategy to find this person. And it can be done coincidental to when you're having whoever you get, the technical expert, to work on the housing element. I don't think we should just lay it flat. I think we should put more effort behind this and cast a wider net to find this person, because it's pretty key, I think. And if they have a senior planner background, great. But the personality is what's going to make this position, the soft skill sets they have, the communication skills with the public and that kind of thing. That's what's going to make this position. So I don't want to lay this position flat, and I think hopefully I've made myself clear on that. And I don't know if the rest of the board would go along with that or not, but we can do it in tandem with you spending the money that you've talked about for the housing element. I wanted to point out that this housing ladder came from the Housing Collaborative, basically. Yeah, you made a better graphic than what happened at the Collaborative, but this actually came out of that work. So I just want to lend the importance of this group towards what we need collectively for our community. Let's see. I think there was one other. Oh, I wanted to mention that our group that is the core group that plans the Housing Collaborative has set a date for May 18th for the next one, and we'll be trying to collect a bigger email list of people to invite. So if anyone wants to make sure that they're invited, please send me their email address. So we can make sure that they're included. That's kind of a side note. So those are my comments. So since this is kind of more of a study session, I'm not expecting us to just go one time through. I think that this is a dialogue. So Supervisor.
And it's, having heard from the other board members, I can kind of see where you're coming from. I would just say, the way I see this, and having heard from you now, I can kind of see, okay, this is where I need to explain my position better, is that where I think our county really excels is not necessarily trying to attract the perfect candidate for a job that has all the skill set that we need, that can hit the ground running from day one. Where I've seen real success in a lot of our departments is developing talent in-house. And so if we can get somebody into a position, and what I'm more concerned about is protecting their responsibilities exclusively toward housing by having a different job position. And as long as that maintains there, I'm confident that that person, even if they don't come right out of the box with all the knowledge and the skill set that we might need, that they'll be able to develop that, because this is a long-term issue that's going, it's going to be around for quite some time, that housing is going to be a challenge. And so, I'm confident that it seems like we're just sort of changing the title to cast a wider net, which is kind of what it sounds like. And I'm not sure that there necessarily is that person, that perfect person that's going to be able to lead the county and be the person that can hustle and get grants and work with developers and work with the community, and then work in behind closed doors and do that part of the job as well. But if we just get somebody in that position that at least has a baseline of understanding, they'll be trained, and by by a certain period of time, I think they'll have that job. But by looking for that perfect person, we're wasting time. It's taking longer.
What my comments were, I guess I wasn't clear enough, is that we have the time, because we're going to be spending the money right now for the housing element. We have the time to work on this and perfect it to find the right person.
Yeah, and that was another thing that kind of occurred to me, is why would we pay a consultant to work on the housing element when we could hire a staffer who can do the housing element plus some of these other things? It seems like, which is the better deal cost-wise? It seemed to me that having a position filled would be, we're spending almost the same amount of money on a consultant that has only one responsibility, whereas if we have a staffer, they have multiple responsibilities for the same cost.
So if we had someone who was a housing development specialist, we would look to a consultant with a limited role. So they might be providing just general oversight or technical oversight to ensure that our housing element is consistent with state law. So without a housing development specialist, all of those tasks would be shifted to the consultant. I'm going to make sure I'm being clear. So if we had someone, we could do some legwork. Without that person, though, all of it goes to the consultant. Even if we had someone, I would still feel that I would recommend to your board a consultant in some capacity because of the chaos that HCD has given us to try to fit a housing, the scope of work that a housing element must meet.
So either way, we're hiring a consultant.
That would be my recommendation.
But I guess
That seems to be what other counties are
how
doing.
wide or narrow the scope is depends on whether or not we have somebody working on housing in-house. And I assume that correlates with the cost of that consultant.
Yes, and let me give a little history. Is when we did the 2019 housing element, we did it in-house. Sheila Shanahan was the champion of that, and the way we wrote that housing element was she would schedule time, she would strap me to a chair, I would just talk about housing and how we were going to do it, and she would type, and GIS was heavily involved. We had to do all sorts of housing inventories. We had 655 units we had to account for in the county, and so it was very, very labor intensive. It was very chaotic. It took 2 or 3 rounds of revisions at HCD, including special consultation with Paul McDougall, who is one of the heads of HCD, and we barely got it off in time. When you also, as a part of the housing element, you have to reflect back on your current housing element and what did we accomplish. And actually every year we turn in an annual progress report. And the housing element that Sheila and I wrote, while it met the letter of the law, when we turn in I won't make you talk. When we turn in the annual progress report, it's kind of a copy and paste from year to year. We're kind of just, it's not very exciting. It's just sort of going through the motions. So with a consultant, Supervisor Campbell, I'm hoping we can have a more robust and exciting housing element that can actually do some new and innovative things for us.
So if I can weigh back in just briefly here, I'm hearing from Supervisor Campbell, which I'm in favor of, that we look towards, finding somebody for the housing specialist position. And if we need to, spend time to bring them up to speed, to allow them to, perform better, we should look at that. As far as the consultant, again, I'm very concerned about the costs. I see in our document here that salary savings, approximately $77,000 plus potential grants. I would suggest we put a cap of $100,000 using no additional county funds. We've already achieved these salary savings. And again, I'm not in favor of a senior planner. Thank you.
Supervisor Kirk, did you have any additional comments?
I'll just say I agree. I never thought that we would never try to fill that position eventually. I think the question before us is direction on housing and update the homeless or the housing element position and funding. So the housing element, we got that 2024 deadline. If we don't have a staff member and it's a very expertise type situation, then we got to get going on it. But I would support, obviously, still looking to fill that position eventually. So kind of back to your comments.
Well, we've kind of been a hodgepodge of comments
Yeah.
here.
Sort of a mixture of
yeah.
all of it.
What I am hearing is that the planner position is not going to do the housing element exclusively. Even if we got somebody really good, chances are we'd need a consultant to help us do the housing element. Is that correct?
Yeah, and we have not just salary savings, but we have LEAP and REAP grant
Right.
funds that I mentioned, so we.
Over $150,000.
Yeah.
I would like to add, back in November, I attended the Rural Housing Summit, and I attended a breakout session with HCD and consultants, and they specifically talked about the housing element. And at the end, I asked, what are your top 2 recommendations for counties? And they said, 1, start now, and 2, hire a consultant. And the reason is there's so many new laws that came down this last year. I think there was over 100. They really recommended a consultant.
Yeah, and I'm hearing that in the presentation, so thank you for adding that clarification. But what I'm not hearing from the board is any kind of unanimity in whether we spend some time to find a housing development specialist, because it is we've noted how hard it is to find one, and so far our efforts have not netted any positive results. And I'm hearing across the board that some say a planner, some say a housing specialist, so.
Well, it sounds like we have 4 questions to answer here. The first is about the housing element and the need to hire a consultant and using the existing fiscal year salary savings for that, which it sounds to me we don't really have much of a choice. Is that what you would say? I mean, there are different colors.
You
of how
always
we
have
could
a
do it.
choice.
Right, but
It seems to me like a good idea because we have funds. I don't have to come to you and ask for any additional
that's what I'm
funds.
saying, is what I'm guessing is you're going to be back here again saying you need this. if
Well, what we
don't
will,
do
then
anything
what we
about
would
it
do
now.
when we come back, we will come back because we will have gone through an RFP process, and we'll know our range. The range that I gave you in the staff report was research that I did looking at contracts from other cities and counties on what they spent. It wasn't a number I made up. I went not just in their RFP, but I looked at the contracts that they executed for specific consultants. And that is also how we came up with the list of who to send the RFP to, was that I had spent some time researching not just the cost, but who was preparing them.
Okay. And then, so the next one was use the remaining LEAP and REAP grants to grants to fund tasks which will be completed by the consultant, which I didn't hear anybody. It sounds like.
Right, that's
we're okay with that.
$150,000 when you combine it with the salary savings that we have right now.
So I didn't think there was any issue with that.
There's only one supervisor who said limit it to 100,000.
Oh, okay. So then there was, and then we have the recruit. Then it's the question about whether we want to downgrade the housing specialist position to something smaller or continue trying to get a housing specialist.
And that's really seems.
That's kind of the salient.
That's kind of the last maybe piece of this other is there's the housing element and then the position. And, you know, the alternatives would be, which I've heard, continue to recruit for, bring a team in to help find a housing development specialist. I've heard look at the specs to make sure that, you know, the scope of work is correct. And the alternative, or at least another way, would be to say, hey, we tried that, it didn't work. We're going to abandon that plan essentially and hire more of a generalist that would be focused on housing.
Supervisor Half, I'm sorry, could I weigh in just
Sure.
over here as I'm listening? So we brought this item before the board primarily because we know the importance of this position to you. But I just want to remind you that this really is operations. We have the authority to spend monies within the budget to execute what we are required to do. And I'm not saying this to be argumentative in any way, just that because this is so important to you, we wanted to provide an update. What we could do as I'm listening is we can still continue, we could actually fly both positions because the one would be considered an underfill and see if maybe you cast the net, that would be even a wider net. So you go for the senior planner and you continue with the housing specialist. I will let you know our team is doing a great job on recruitments. They're doing a lot of, you see some of those. They're casting that net wider than ever before. They're being very creative. So I think there's a way that because what I'm hearing is you don't want to give up the position, and nor has that been our recommendation to give it up. But without the housing element, it does limit the foundation or platform for that individual to begin working. So that, or was our original, when I spoke with Quincy, was to look at getting that housing element done to create the foundation for when that person comes in. But in the meantime, doesn't mean we have to stop recruiting. And we can recruit for both, and if Quincy finds someone that applies to the senior planner role, then we can downgrade or underfill the position, and with time, if they're able to move into the housing specialist, then they can, or we come back and we modify the allocated positions that your board approves. So all I'm saying is we could do all the things you want. We just want to make sure you have an update, and we wanted to hear where the board still stood on that position. And what I'm hearing is that the majority understand, well, all of you understand that we need to do a contract for a consultant, and then one would like us to limit that as much as possible, the cost, and we'll do our best, of course, but that you also want to continue with the position, the recruitment for the position. And we're going to do our best to do all of those things. But I just want to say there's a way for us to recruit for both, and then we can do an underfill if needed, and we can come back to your board with an update so you're aware of what the status is.
Well, I like that with the addition that if you have the capacity to call in some advisors from the business community, from the housing collaborative, to help you expand your recruitment for this housing specialist, I think that would be a perfect use. And it shows the community that even though the board let go of the Tuolumne County Planning Committee, we are committed to getting community involvement in specialized things like this. And this would be a perfect use for the first time to use a committee, not a committee, but an advisory group for such a thing. I don't know if the rest of the board feels that way or not.
I'm open to that. Just to clarify, when you say we could fly both positions, you're not saying we're going to hire both positions. Okay. Because I didn't want people to come away with the idea that we now are spending twice the money on this position that we originally.
Yeah, we only have authority for one position, but we can
You have
underfill,
authority
and
for
we do
one, you can
underfill.
fly both, and then
Yep.
whichever one seems to
Yeah, I
work
like
out.
that idea.
Okay. I'm open with that. I'm open to that idea.
I see a thumbs up from Supervisor Kirk. Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll start with our next agenda item. All right, thank you. And just as a reminder, I don't see anybody here that had come in, but we have pulled the the closed session item for today, so that is not on the agenda any longer, just as a reminder. So let's see. Tanya, can you please read our next agenda item?
Thank you. Item 2, discussion, review, and board direction on the draft legislative platform as developed during the board workshop on January 10th, 2023.
All right, thank you. And we have our CAO, Tracy Riggs, and our legislative analyst, Mark Fisher, here to present.
Sorry, here we're having some technical difficulties getting the presentation to come up on the screen here. In the meantime, I'll go ahead and start talking. Do we have anyone from IT here? No? Okay. Okay, so I'm going to start talking while he works on this. There were a few of these in the back, and I think most of them are gone now. We were hoping to get, there we go, he's got it.
That's
Okay.
not how it's supposed to work.
Well. Okay. All right. So this today is a study session in order to review the work that was conducted during a board workshop. And on that day, as your board will remember, we had we actually had invited all of our legislators to participate during that day. And the individuals who did participate were Catherine Freeman from CSAC, Marianne Warmerdam from RCRC, and Kimberly Pruitt from Congressman Tom McClintock's office. During During that day, we went through a whole series of exercises, and the board did work between different tables that were separated into specific groups. And what I received back from our department heads was they did appreciate the time with the board. They did feel listened to, and what you have before you is the culmination of that day, that event. What we would like to do is Mark will take you through his presentation. We have some recommendations and some general ideas for conversation for the board, and we'll look to you today to help finalize this item. If we arrive to where you feel comfortable with this, we will bring it back to a future board meeting, most likely the 21st, on a consent item for you to approve. And with that, I will switch this to my colleague, Mark.
Thank you. So as was said, your board participated in the panel discussion with our invited guests and your department heads and the CEO staff, where we talked about the panel's areas of legislative focus for the year, as well as some general approaches and strategies of legislative advocacy. In the legislative platform development exercise, we brought back the much longer list of items that was recommended by your board to go into the legislative platform, and we sort of pared it down into the draft that we have today. Each of the items falls under one of the 5 policy areas: agriculture, environment and natural resources, government finance and operations, health and human services, housing, land use and transportation, and public safety and emergency management. During the panel, our invited guests had recommended areas that they thought were the most important, and those are fire and forest management and fuels reduction, infrastructure, water, and homelessness. During that discussion, they had some sort of general recommendations and some more specific recommendations. The first of their general recommendations is that we should attempt to use our platform to establish relationships with elected representatives, but not necessarily our own. We should try to, get the word out of what Tuolumne thinks about legislative priorities, and see if we can find allies in other communities to sort of, jump on board with what we're trying to accomplish. And that we should also try to attempt to develop relationships with urban areas. More specifically, our guests said that we should try to align our legislative priorities with those of RCRC, CSAC, and those of our specific elected representatives. It's much easier to accomplish legislative advocacy when you guys kind of already agree about what should happen. And that we should also try to focus on 2 to 4 priorities that could reasonably accomplish in the next 2 to 4 years. So our recommendations to you today is that we should revisit and discuss the general principles of the platform, keeping in mind that number 1 is sort of the most important one. It's the one that enables the board chair to sign letters drafted by staff to send off to legislative offices. And we also agree that we should try to align ourselves with RCRC, CSAC, and our representatives. And one final thought is that we should definitely try to consider the strengths and weaknesses of general versus specific platform items. When we make something very general, it's wide enough that we can approach and advocate for or oppose pieces of legislation that come up because we have this big umbrella statement and a lot of pieces of legislation could potentially fit under it. And then with specific items, we could try to focus on one specific thing that we want to get through and try to collaborate and get legislators to sponsor legislation that would address those specific small issues. And one other thing is we should consider to maybe have all of them be general, all of them be specific, or perhaps a mix of those 2 strategies.
Okay, sorry, this is making a lot of noise. Okay, so I wanted to go through a few examples when we talk about general statements that are on the legislative platform as it is right now, as opposed to very specific items that are on there. While I think there is value in both, and I wanted to go through those, can you go through the, so let's go down to the agriculture, environment, and natural resources. So in here is an example of some very general statements: long-term dedicated sustainable funding for forest management, protect and expand local water resources. Those are very broad, and that allows staff and to really get out there and do some advocacy work with supervisors. Also allows the chair, when things arise, that we have great flexibility in writing either letters of opposition or letters of support if needed, as opposed to, say, the next one where we talk about advocate for inclusion of wildfire smoke and GHG emissions and CARB. I'm not saying this is a bad statement. What I'm saying is it's so specific, it really narrows the type of work that we can do. The other one is an example, very specific, is government finance and operations. These are all amazing things, and we do need to do them. However, they're very specific. So we talk about separate court employees from the county's contract for reporting and actuarial calculations. We do need to do this, but do we need a broader statement that allows us to go outside of even just doing that when we're looking to reduce the county's unfunded liabilities? So those are the kind of conversations I was hoping to have, and Debbie Batista, our auditor controller, is here. She can help us craft some of that language that might make those statements broader, and yet you fit these items in there. As we were talking, we thought it was Mary Ann who had stated that while you have your legislative platform, and there will be some general concepts that will give the staff the marching orders and the board chair the ability to sign those letters, we should have a list of 2 to 4 things that you want to accomplish within the next 2 to 4 years. So I'm hoping we can get those specifics of those specific items you might like to accomplish, like fire and, seek to support legislation to addressing fire insurance in California, whatever, something specific like that. And maybe it is the CARB emissions from wildfire and vehicles, or whatever that might be for your board. But my recommendation, in order to have the utmost flexibility with our legislative platform, is to have these larger conceptual type of statements, and then behind that we'll have a list of 2 to 5 items specifically that you want to address through the next 2 to 4 years with each of the legislative the years that we have with our current legislation, and then as they change again in a couple of years, we'll see that too. So I'm hoping that helps, and if you want to go through each of these areas, we do have staff here who can help us talk through, like when we get to finance, Debbie is here and she'll be able to help us with some of that wording.
Okay, as usual, we'll start out with clarifying questions from the board first, and then I think we'll wait to have weigh in from the public for a while. We need to have a conversation up here and then hear from the public, and then finalize what we're doing up here. So to start out, we're going to do clarifying questions on the presentation, and Supervisor Kirk.
I just wanted to, I don't know if it's much of a question, but I would think that we should pick our 3 or 4 things first, because if we go through, are you looking for us to go through each one of the potential legislative things and clean it up or be specific or less specific? Because I think we could do that all day. I think we should start off with, let's come up with 3 or 4, address those, and then if we have time left over, maybe go through the rest of the document. Is that kind of what you were thinking?
Yeah, we could start there for sure. The 2 to 4 items you absolutely want to accomplish within the next 2 to 4 years. You could also just say, CAO and staff work with department heads to give those more conceptual language, like say under finance. So I would work with the finance team, Debbie, Justin, and Kanan, to make more global statements of reducing county unfunded liabilities, seeking, sustainable funding. That's the PILT, the federal PILT dollars, stuff like that. But if we know exactly what you want, that will also help us fine tune some of those more conceptual type language changes. So however you all want to participate.
Supervisor Campbell, do you have any questions regarding this process for the presentation?
No questions.
Okay. So I do have a question. Mark, are you going to take us through this document, the 2023 legislative platform, where you have the general principles and the policy areas? We've got the 5 policy areas with specifics underneath them. Are we going to go through that, or what's your plan?
I hadn't planned to, but they are in the presentation if you'd like me to just go through and read them.
Yeah, I think for the public's sake and for a refresher for us, because it's been a month since we've had the workshop, I think it would be good to go through this. And with an eye, what you had said before we started today, under general principles, you said we can get actually even more specific in some of those general principles that will be the preamble to whatever our policy areas end up being. So when our board is looking at that, be looking at it with an eye of what else can we add under the banner of general principles that will make it very clear what we're doing here for the next 2 years. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll tackle that part first so I don't forget. So what I was saying before is that you could expand the general principles to include items that are sort of legacy items that you think that you're just going to continually want to advocate for or against over time. The example that we had spoken for was about PILT. So if that's something that your board considers high priority that you want to continue to approach year after year, you could add that to the general principles as something that we would just always be looking for.
So for the public's sake, do you have that document where you can bring it up right now and show it on the screen?
Yeah, just one second.
That way everybody can see what we're talking about here. Yeah, if you can,
So
yeah.
it's to be or not to be.
Yes, this one.
Okay.
We should also point out that only federal PILT really affects us that much because of the amount of federally owned land.
Right.
So I'll go back. So under the current general principles, we have that the legislative platform approved by the Tuolumne County Board of Supervisors authorizes the board chair to sign letters drafted by county staff that express support or opposition to any legislation. Seek and support legislation that increase the funding, flexibility, and specific language which supports rural needs. Seek and support legislation to enhance local control and oppose efforts that will hinder the county's ability to self-govern. Seek and support equitable levels of state and federal funding for county-mandated programs. Oppose federal or state legislation for new, transferred, or realigned mandated programs that do not contain their own sufficient revenue source. Under the first of the policy areas, agriculture, environment, and natural resources, we have long-term dedicated sustainable funding for forest management, protect and expand local water resources at the state and federal levels, local water system rights acquisition support, water rights support, water infrastructure support, and advocate for the inclusion of wildfire, smoke, and greenhouse gas emissions and carb and air quality calculations. Under government finance and operations, separate court employees from the county's contract PERS for reporting and actuarial calculations. Adjust federal PILT to increase annually in proportion to the increase of property taxes and increase SRS by an appropriate inflationary percentage, such as cost price index?
Consumer price index.
Consumer price index. Okay.
And SRS is Secure Rural Schools.
Secure Rural Schools, yeah.
That's the short name because it's much longer.
Right. Shift the payment responsibility for the preparation, processing, and collection of school district property taxes to the state of California. Under Health and Human Services, secure funding for care court that does not affect MHSA or other current county subdivisions. And this is a concern that is shared with CSAC and RCRC. And to grant homeless services funding as an allocation to include local control. Under Housing, Land Use, and Transportation, support legislation for more rural county funding for existing roads. Support legislation that streamlines the process in developing housing projects in very high fire severity zones. Support legislation that standardizes affordable homeowners insurance rates that are comparable to the region. And under Public Safety and Emergency Management, support state and federal legislation and regulatory actions that promote criminal justice and emergency management programs for rural communities. Under that, to ensure secured funding for long-term health and sustainability of all public safety and emergency management programs that include law enforcement, sheriff, criminal justice programs, probation, district attorney, fire, and emergency management. correct Medi-Cal requirements to allow funding for adults and children in custody, create a safety net for mental health and substance use dependency services that does not pull resources from the criminal justice system, and fund preventative measures to support preparedness and a rapid response for all wildfire and public safety needs. Yeah, that's it.
All right, so we kind of were instructed by our legislative partners from the Congressman's office and from RCRC and CSAC to whittle this down to 3 or 4. So I'd like to hear from each of you as to what rings most important to you as a board member.
Did we want to do that before public comment or okay?
Yeah, we're going to have time to go to public and then come back because this is a discussion. So, yeah.
I'll be happy to kick it off if you would
Great,
like.
thank you.
Yeah, and that was the big takeaway from the workshop was exactly that. Each of the 3 representatives, RCRC, McClintock's office, and CSAC, all said that if you come into any legislator's office with a laundry list of 20 or 30 or even 10 or 15 things, their eyes are going to glaze over and they're going to tell you and they're going to ask, what do you really want? Okay, and which I can completely identify with. You know, I often ask people the same question when they need help in our community. And so the things that really highlight to me, and I think the discussion about like payment in lieu of taxes and secure rural schools, that really rings true. Those are things that, you know, are important to me, but I don't think that those are always important and they're always going to be ongoing. And so I don't see the need to necessarily highlight them specifically. But there's one issue that I think's it's not very strongly reflected in the 5 policy category areas. It's kind of the last item on section 3, which is grant homelessness, SVS funding as an allocation to include local control. I think we need to be more broad than that, and whether or not we choose homelessness as a policy issue in this document, it has chosen us as an issue, and so whether or not we put it in this document, it's going to be an issue that we will have to spend considerable amount of time advocating for and working on. And so I just kind of briefly came up with a more general idea that we would support legislation for more rural county funding for county programs to combat homelessness. That covers what's in section 3B and also can cover a lot of the other things that we generally work on.
Sorry, could you actually say that one more time?
Sure. Support legislation for more rural funding for county programs to combat homelessness. And of course, I'm not married to that language. So that's one. I think that's a big one. The second one is, and I'm putting these in order in case you want to know where my heart is. The second one is support legislation. It's section 4A, support legislation for more rural county funding for existing roads. I think that's an area where there are opportunities now that we need to seize upon, that there haven't been opportunities in the past. So, you know, what is the point of spending a lot of energy asking and lobbying for these things if there's really not going to be a positive outcome? I think that calculus has changed a lot, and we really do need to put a lot of energy into supporting existing road funding for rural counties specifically. And I think we've been very disadvantaged in that area by a number of factors, whether you talk about VMT or how public contract codes are created. There's several different pressure points where we can work in that area. The third one is This is something we've been working on already, but I think we've had a lot of success in forest management and securing funding for our county in that area, and I don't want to take our foot off the gas pedal. I think we're at a good spot, and we have a really good reputation, and the money is coming in for that, and we need to keep it going. So keeping the pressure on there. And if Chair, you'll permit me, what is that? Is that 3?
Yeah,
The three,
but
okay.
what number? Are you under public safety and
I'm
emergency?
on the very top, so this,
Oh, the top.
what I just mentioned is policy area number 1, section A.
Oh, gotcha.
So if you'll permit me a 4th,
It's under agriculture, environment, and natural resources.
yes.
Okay.
And then a 4th would be would be section 4, bullet C, support legislation standardizing affordable homeowners insurance rates that are comparable to others in the region. So that's 4C. There again, I think that it's something that everyone in the community recognizes, and everyone's been touched by this as an issue. And it's something that I think the legislature has a great deal of authority and power to ameliorate. And so that's an area where we need to make our voices heard. And that point going to earlier about working with other counties and advocating for shared interests, I think that's the poster child for that. We're not the only county experiencing this, although I think we're probably the worst.
We are the worst.
But we're not the only one.
Right.
And so that's an area where we can really work with some of our neighbors.
So that's your number 4.
That's my number 4. And then as a bonus, I would say
No.
3A care court, I think, is something that our county really needs to figure out. So if anyone else has that on their list, then I would agree. But if they don't, then you can cut that one off. That's why I say a bonus. But those are my 4
Great.
key areas. And thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Kirk.
All right, I'll make it pretty quick. Number 1, and I heard 2, Supervisor Campbell and me, it's on our same list. My first priority would be homeowners insurance. It's crushing our people. It's sending more and more people into, I believe, homelessness, and it's causing the white blue-collar worker to not be able to afford the home moving forward.
So you're under number 4, housing and land use
4C.
transportation
4C,
C.
absolutely.
Okay.
We've been dealing with this since Rimfire. We're not getting any traction. We need the legislators to wake up and represent the rural counties. So affordable homeowners insurance is my number 1. Number 2 is on my party, also matches Supervisor Campbell's, which is 4A, existing roads. Support legislation for more rural county funding for existing roads. And I have some very specifics that I could add to that at another date, but that's high level. The third one would be, this differs, it's similar to Supervisor Campbell's 1A, which is forest management, but like he said, I think we're doing a really good job and we're going to continue to see money. Where I think we could see an explosion of attention, an explosion of money in forest management is, again, to advocate, this is 1C, advocate for the inclusion of wildfire smoke in GHG gas emissions and in CARB in air quality calculations. And on that note, if you're taking notes, AB, for sure, if you're taking notes, AB 397. He was running for governor, but Mr. Daly, a couple of years ago, he introduced some legislation. He just did it again. Right now, AB 397 is to calculate wildfire emissions, so we could actually jump on that now if the board supported. But basically, I think if we could get the legislators to account for those emissions, I think there's going to be a lot more money, which at the end of the day is going to do exactly what Supervisor Campbell and myself and this board and our great staff have been talking about, which is continued resources for forest management. So it's just a different angle from 1A. And then my last one would be 1B, which is local water system, rights acquisition support, water rights, et cetera, water infrastructure support. But it's kind of, the angle I take on it is a little different, which is if we did ever have a major catastrophe, if we ever lost a flume, that's our source of water. So it's not just about acquiring water, it's also about making that water system long-term safe for the community. So those would be my 4. Like I said, I heard 2 that line up with Supervisor Campbell. So we'll hear what the rest of you 2 have to say and get this list figured out.
Supervisor Goldenberg.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I just wanted to state that as our legislative folks that were involved in our board session here, we do need to be specific on our asks, right? Having generics doesn't help matters at all, so we do need to be very specific. So my 4, number 1 would be 4C, again on the homeowners insurance. That's just been a terribly destructive thing for a large amount of the people in our county. Number 2, going back and forth, but I'm going to go with the funding on the homeless, but in specific, looking for operational funding, right? We see a lot of funding that comes in that offers one-time funding, but it doesn't include anything to, continue the effort. But, that noted, it's not all on the county. We need to have collaborative efforts with our nonprofits, faith-based, and other people to move that forward. Number 3, I'm looking at number 5, public safety emergency management. Item 4, fund preventative measures to support preparedness, rapid response. I get that, but it's too generic. In specific, again, we see a lot of funds that come in that allow us to do fuel breaks, and we're working with our federal partners, with the Stanislaus National Forest, with YSS, and other, folks. But, the area that's been really lacking, especially, because we have a lot of, people in our county that are low income and elderly, we need to be able to offer them assistance in defensible space, particularly, and home hardening, and not just home and business hardening, because hardening efforts can absolutely save properties. My last one, number 4, I'm looking at the PILT. I think that's very important. And I like the language as it's stated here. We just need to have something that, will point to, what the county can depend on in getting, decent funding in that area. So that's my 4.
Thank you. Okay, I've got everybody's notes here. Let's see if I can find mine. My number 1 was under Housing, Land Use, and Transportation 4, and it's 4C, support legislation that standardizes affordable homeowners insurance rates that are comparable to others in the region. It has been known for some time that we have more fair plan, people on fair plan insurance here in this county than any other county. Any other county. Take that in. It's not per capita. More than where the Paradise Fire was, other fires. We've got to do something about this. And to that end, I want to put in memory banks what I had written when we did our, individual things. I would really like to see us doing this. I don't know if it'll happen, but what I had stated for homeowners insurance, I would like to see us support a collaborative approach between the state insurance providers and policyholders to develop a comprehensive program of wildfire risk mitigation policies, strategies, and projects in wildfire zones that meet agreed upon standards with resultant agreed upon reductions to insurance premiums once identified thresholds and milestones have been met. Now, what that is saying, that's a bunch of jumbledy-gook, right? But what that is saying is we are doing a lot here in Tuolumne County with our SERL projects, with our MSA, with even down to, on a personal level, private property owners doing their, now I've lost the name of it, it's not Fire Safe. It's the program that we do, Firewise, thank you. I'm part of the first community. You think I'd remember. Firewise, we're doing a lot here, and we're kind of following the pattern that was explained to us by our ex-California fire marshal. She did a study on what works and what doesn't work, and she noted a couple of counties in Colorado that started getting insurance companies invited back in because of all the activities they were doing to clean up not only public but private lands. And we're doing those things. So there should be some kind of attachment to a reduction in fire insurance because we are doing those things. So anyway, I'm off my soapbox now. This is just very important to me. So that's why it's number one.
Supervisor Haff, can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
Is that verbiage that you used in the original draft document,
Yes.
the big 7-page one?
I just read it verbatim. That's
Okay,
what
so you want to see some of that language reincorporated into
I'd
this item?
like to see a push from Tuolumne County to RCRC to CSAC to see how many other counties we can have climb on board for this specific thing.
Thank you.
Okay, let me see where my number 2 is. It's under Housing, Land Use, and Transportation, number 4, and it's 4A, support legislation for more rural county funding for existing roads. And we've got so many roads here that are not collector roads, they're not major roads, that are not going to get any support, and that's just wrong. And whether it means redoing the SB1 allocations, because right now the counties, all 58 counties, only get 40% of the monies collected from our gas tax. The rest, 60%, goes to the state. And we have strings attached when that money comes down to our county. We can't spend it in the way we see fit. So that's got to change. And we've got to get more funding for the rural counties, especially counties like ours that have a lot of roads and not so much in the population department. So that's why that's number 2. Let's see. Number 3 is a popular one with this board. It is part of number 1, Agriculture, Environment, and Natural Resources. Actually, it's supported by one other. It is B, protect and expand local water resources, state and federal. The local water system rights, acquisition support, water rights support, water infrastructure support. The treasure of the Sierra Madre, right? Water, not gold. It's important. And let's see, my number 4. That's the popular one with just about, quite a few of us. It is under 3, Health and Human Services, and that is for more support for rural counties for funding to cover homelessness. I would strike for more county programs. We don't necessarily need more programs, we just need more money. And if it's siloed into different programs and they're going to say how we can spend it, blah, 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 I would like less regulations, just more funding. So, but I do support that, the B, grant homeless services funding, and that's my number 4.
All right, I'm going to summarize based on what I heard from you, where we have 3 or more on an area, and then you guys can decide what you want to do with the others. So under Ag, Environment, and Natural Resources, there are 4 of you. No, I'm sorry. There's only 2 of you. I'm looking to where, okay, I'm going to go to where we have 3 or more. Right there, there's only 2 and 2. The one area, the first one is when it comes to homelessness, we have 3 of you. I have Supervisor Haff, Supervisor Goldenberg, and Supervisor Campbell about seek additional sustainable and recurring funding to support homeless programs at the local level. And there are 3 of you under Housing, Land Use, and Transportation to increase funding for county roads at the rural level. And there are 4 of you who want to support legislation that standardizes about homeowners insurance. So that all 4 of you said that you wanted to approach that one. That is the only place I have 3 or more of you. The rest of you, I have 2.
And I wonder if you did a weighted one, because we listed our 1 through 4 in terms of what was our highest priority. I wonder if you did a weighted one, if it would come out any differently.
What I did was anytime there were at least 3 of you who even
Right.
mentioned it, so
That-
yeah,
right.
so we don't have
Insurance is the
3,
other one
whether
I had
they're
all
weight
4.
rated or not, if you don't. So, do you want me to tell you where I had 2, and you guys can
Well,
just,
I would just say, since we were on that, I would say insurance was, since it had all 4, that would be our number 1 priority.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, that
Perfect, yep,
one's in.
Yeah.
okay.
And the other thing I was going to add is that on the homelessness one, we had 3 supervisors, Goldenberg and Half. I had suggested language on that, and they had made, I think, some tweaks in terms of the ongoing operations and more total funding and less control. I think those are great additions, and so if we can incorporate that in the original language, because I think all that I had said was more funding generally, and so if we want to be more specific to operations, I'm open to that.
What I heard you say, Supervisor Campbell, was more funding to
Rural.
cover more county programs, and I'd like to strike the more county programs. We just need more funding, however it comes, for homelessness.
Sort of legislation for more rural
More rural
funding.
county funding for more county programs is what I heard you say.
No, more funding for county programs to combat homelessness is what.
Okay,
More funding.
okay,
Not more programs.
okay.
Yeah. Which I agree with.
I stand corrected.
Yeah.
So now the top one comes out to be which one?
So the top one is the fire insurance. The next one where we have 3 of you is roads, which is not surprising. So that I would say that's probably your number 1 and 2. To get to 3 and 4, you all will have to, I'm sorry, there's 3 would be homelessness. There's 3 of you on that one,
And then,
without having to go to,
and then the only one left with just 2 is the water rights issue.
no, there's 2 I had 2 about the forest management, funding for forest management.
Oh, that's right.
2 for water. Let me go through. And that was it, where there's only 2.
Okay.
Then
Is there
there
some way we could kind of incorporate those 2? Because they're both in agriculture, environment, natural resources, and they cover, land use and water.
Yeah, and that might be a good way to split the baby, because a
Yeah.
lot of research is showing that forest management directly affects our water storage and.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if we can put the sustainable funding for forest management somehow up in our general principles.
Well, I think we should also, an example of that would be where Supervisor Goldenberg was going as well, was it includes not just for federal forests, but for forest management. We talk about ladder and canopy fuels reductions and defensible space for our homeowners. So we're already seeking those types of grants for individuals. We've already received it, so we need to continue. So I think that's one of those broad statements. Either we could push it up under a guiding principle, and under that, we know that that means defensible space, federal forest management, water infrastructure. It could include some of those, when I say all watersheds. If you want to approach more of the water, I'm thinking more like the hardening, so like the flumes and some of that kind of stuff. I didn't hear 3, so I don't know if you want to go there, but there's a difference between, right, the infrastructure with water and then the water, I'm sorry, I just lost the terminology. No, the watershed. There's a difference there, and so I'm not sure where you guys want to go with that.
Well, I'd like to bring this to the public to see if we have any public comment before we finalize this, and see who has thoughts on what we have discussed so far. So please come up if you do.
Yeah, and just part of that, we have 3 that, we have 4, 3, and 3, is that correct? So we're looking for a 4th item.
Yeah.
Okay,
And then,
I just wanted to confirm. Thank
and
you.
between section 1A and B, all 4 of us, between A and B, all 4 of us support it. So we're pretty close there. Just pointing that out.
Sure would like some public participation, you guys. Who's ready? I think there's a clicker thing on the side there to turn it on. On the side of the mic?
Obviously technically challenged. No, I think your categories are good. You know, in my opinion, forest management kind of ties in with that fire insurance. If you don't have the forest management, you know, you're not, so you're sort of connecting those two things together with your roads. Yeah, we all know, you know, our county's got some of the lowest roads, but, you know, there's also some other things that, you know, when you look at some of the details of the roads, like your maintenance can only put a 1-inch overlay on the roads if they're going in to do it, because the unions have said, okay, if you don't do that, you got to go hire these, you know, union contractors. Maybe there's some ways that we can look at, if we're going to do overlays on roads, we change the criteria and we go back and we are able to overlay them at a better deal, because if you're going to spend all that money to overlay it with just 1 inch, that isn't going to give you a long-term sustainability on the road. It's kind of stupid that, you know, it's like, okay, we're just going to put these sub criteria in there so that your road deteriorates more, or you got to go hire, you know, union. We can't do it in-house. So maybe there's some of the details that we get involved with the roads. And then my last comment is just with water, that was brought up, that with the TUD acquisition and PG&E that'll probably be coming back this year, that's probably one of the most important things for the long-term viability of our county. And, you know, to just look at how do we fund that on the back of the existing ratepayers of TUD is probably not a viable option, in that it's got a value to our overall county. So how can we all tie together to make that deal come together with the details that are finally, when they finally come out with how that whole program is structured. So thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm a local resident, Tuolumne, David Peters. I just wanted to reinforce what you guys are already talking about homeowners insurance. The homeowners are required to foot a great amount of the expenses and the burden of government, schools, everything that goes on in the county. To me, a little bit unfairly. But because of that, and to have all of this insurance, I mean, I'm retired on Social Security and just barely making it, and you're liable to see me next week as you go into Walmart being one of the greeters. And necessarily because of these expenses. If you have any question about whether the people of Tuolumne County or how they feel about this issue, if you were at the meeting of the insurance commissioner that was at Opera Hall Garage, he hadn't been within 100 miles of the foothills since then, because if there hadn't been sheriffs there, he probably would have been lynched right on the spot. That's how hostile the people were. They wouldn't even let him talk. My suggestion was, being old, I have a little bit of historic perspective on this. And I made a statement there that I didn't have much use for Moonbeam Brown when he was in his first go-around as governor of California. But he did one thing that was good. If you don't remember it, it's when the auto companies, insurance companies, planned on pulling out of California because it was too expensive to insure automobiles in California. So Brown, to his credit, said, okay, if you won't insure automobiles, you won't insure anything in California. You cannot sell insurance in California. Well, the next week, guess what happened? All the companies came back and started insuring automobiles in California. You've got to do that kind of stuff for these people. They're not going to understand anything else. And the insurance commissioner, all that he did after all that screaming and yelling and people saying, hey, I'm going broke, I can't pay my bills, I'm, you know, et cetera, there was two issues. It was the issue of just the insurance for the regular person like myself in the county. And the other issue was that the rich people that own houses up here, $1 million houses, the state would only allow them to insure up to a certain level of value for that property. I forget what it was, $700,000. Well, the poor rich people were just up in arms because they couldn't insure their houses through the state program because their houses were worth $1.25 million.
Thank you. We do have a limit of 3 minutes. You made some really good comments, and I appreciate it.
Okay, well, that's the only thing that changed.
Yeah.
They gave the rich people a boost to $1.25 million, and we got nothing.
Thank you. I think it was Insurance Commissioner John Garamendi who was really tough back in the day also.
I think you all know me. My name is Randy Hanvelt. I used to be one of you. This subject is kind of near and dear to me because we didn't even have one in the county before I became one of a supervisor. We put together a legislative platform, but let me just make a few generic comments. What are you going to do with this? You're going to give it to a legislative person or their staff? This is useless in its current form because you're making them read between the lines and figure out what you want done. What do you mean when you talk about roads? I mean, they don't know how bad your road conditions are. Don't make them guess. You got to be specific when you take these problems to them. Now, one of the things we did years ago, we had our roads people write a series of letters talking about the conditions of the roads in our county from a number of aspects. We need to take those kinds of issues and have a plan to force the kind of legislation we want. I mean, you just tell them, advocate for inclusion of wildfire smoke in greenhouse gas emissions. Advocate for that. That isn't what you want. You want to include it. Take that out. Put down include wildfire smoke and greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, you got to be specific. You got to tell them what you want. They will not read your mind. So I'm going to just suggest that you look at putting these things into action and be specific about what the net result you want. I mean, we got the worst roads in the state, maybe. I mean, and you ought to tell them that. So what are you going to do about it? I mean, they're representing us, okay? Tell them what you want and don't be bashful. And every time you find yourself in Sacramento as a supervisor representing our county, find yourself over in the building where your legislators are and take a copy of this and get them to pay attention, but don't give them the whole thing. Just give them a couple items. Hey, we need you working on this thing. We need you working on it now. It's really important. And the other thing is, I think, Madam Chairman, you're the representative to RCRC. They do their annual one, which is 100 pages long or close, of legislative priorities. We need to get our input into that legislative priority, and it happens in December. I used to do that every year. So it's just a couple of suggestions to you. If you're going to make it happen, you can't just have this be a piece of paper. You got to tell them what you want and be redundant, be persistent, and do it time and time again.
And
they won't hear you otherwise.
And specific. Thank you.
Seriously, Randy and I did not coordinate on our comments, so this may sound a little bit redundant.
Oh, we're going to hear a ditto here?
Well, not really. I'm going to just say that I really like the priorities that you came up with. I think those make a lot of sense from the circles I'm flowing around in. Those seem to resonate really well. I'm just going to suggest that you look for alignment with our RCRC and Tom McClintock's office, and I think that's implied that we're going to go look for support, direct support, communication with those folks, and to get support for that. And then I was just going to add to it that there are organizations here in the county and folks that can also pile on and take them with you. And the more noise we make and the more representative, I think our legislators feel about what you're trying to do here and the community, the level of community support that you have for what you're trying to accomplish here, I think will make a difference. We're going to grab Alvarado Nils up here and and Jim Patterson, and we keep dragging them back up here over and over and over and having them working on our legislative agenda. So I just want to encourage the process ahead of this. This is a great step. The next thing is to figure out how we arm ourselves and go make something happen. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, so I'll bring it back to the board. Do we want to try to tighten up a number 4 item? What I'm understanding also from our presentation is that we are attempting here today to tighten this up to where it can come back at a future agenda where we can maybe even on consent, if we can tighten it up enough today where we can approve it. And we'll be done, and we can carry on and do some of the things like Mr. Hanvelt had suggested, and use it for a good purpose.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind the board that once we have, say, the 4 to 5 priority areas that you have for legislation, we will then do the, not more than a 1-page draft of defining what that means. That will also be brought to your board for consideration, so that when you go somewhere or we send this to someone, they will know exactly what you mean by that. So this is meant to be almost like a 1 or 2 page type item, and then attached to each of those will be, what does it mean when we talk about addressing fire insurance in this region? So then we go into that detail of what that means.
Detail, right.
And that we'll do that subsequent to this, and then after we do this, then we'll bring it to the board meeting, and we'll sit with you to make sure that we're capturing what you want as well.
Okay. And for our final comments, I'd like to start this off, if I may, take the chair's privilege here. Usually I go last. I would like to see us put in anything that we feel is important under general principles so that the chair, whether it's me or next year's chair, can sign those letters and get them out. And that would be for general. And then for our 4, and I would like to keep it to 4, I would like to have 4 specific policy areas. And we might have under, like we've all decided, fire insurance is number 1, roads is number 2, and I think homelessness is number 3. We might want to put verbiage underneath there to get more specific about what we're looking for. And then whatever our number 4 is, I would like to suggest that we add the long-term sustainable funding for forest management under our general principles, since we're already doing this and have quite a bit of funding already. We will just want to make sure that that continues. And I would like to make a case for adding the water one to be our number 4, since we have reenacted our water agency and we're very active in that right now. But I'd like to hear from the rest of the board.
I can agree to that. I think that that's a fine policy area, and it's something that we're already kind of proceeding down that path anyway. I do think that, if we can incorporate forest management or continue to, that's another thing that we've been working on for a long time, and so I don't think it means we're going to just drop it. But as a general principle, we live and exist and do business in the forest, and so I think that that's something that is going to exist for our community forever, and so we don't want to lose sight of it. But in terms of in the immediate, looking for specific goals and specific policy pressure points, I can be supportive of going after water.
All right, thank you. Supervisor Goldenberg.
Yeah, so obviously water is huge, right? Our watersheds are incredibly important, and a lot of the activity that takes place in protecting the watersheds comes out of forest management, and what they do or do not do, and I'm very familiar with that as far as fire management as well, setting priorities. I'm a little bit unsure here. Are we talking about just going with water as number 4? Are we including, the forest management and the areas that I mentioned before that are clearly lacking now, which is defensible space and hardening?
Yeah, I had suggested since we're already doing that and we're doing it very well and we're not planning to stop it at any time in the near future, I'm suggesting we put all of that under the general principles that will on this document right here, Supervisor Goldenberg, as part of our general principles, and so that anything that comes up as far as funding for any of those things, the board chair, myself, or whoever is the next year's board chair can sign those letters and get them off.
Okay.
The board.
I would be acceptable to doing that with throwing my voice behind the water.
Thank you. Supervisor Kirk.
I'm hearing majority for water being number 4, so I'll support that. And then again, with forest management being weaved into the
General.
I would just, again, remind this board, and hopefully we'll make the cutoff line, but Natural Resources Committee is specifically talking about that emissions thing, and now with Daley's AB, what did I say it was, AB, anyways, we might be bringing something specific before the board, so I would hope that would still be acceptable since it basically fits in the wildfire mission, or it fits into forest management, but that's kind of a side note. So I would support the majority, which is what I'm hearing, water being number 4.
All right.
Okay, so I'm going to re-summarize, and just to clarify too, are we adding a 5th with Supervisor Kirk's item? Is that what, I mean, that's what are you asking?
No, 4 would be water. Forest management is going to be weaved into the general principles. I was just making the board aware that there will be something coming before us specifically about emissions. And it is specific about legislation, but just since we're already working on it, and we had a discussion as a board a few months ago about wanting to address emissions. So it's not going to be one of our specifics, but just let you know it's coming.
Well, I can see where, I can make a case for where it could fit under forest management principles.
Yeah, if we could weave it in there, then that'd be great. So.
Okay, so we have number 1 is fire insurance, 2 is road funding, and I'm generalizing here, we'll take all the language in. 3 is homeless funding, 4 is water, and then I have moving funding for forest management, defensible space, and home hardening as our principles, since we are already doing those things, that we want to continue seeking funding for those items. Yes?
And I wanted to know from, I don't mean to put you on the spot, Mark, but if you have any further suggestions for adding things into the general principles, adding maybe an extra word or two that would complete that thought, or probably not off the top.
I didn't have any specific suggestions of things that are already on here, but I just wanted you to know that that was an option that you did have.
Okay.
Supervisor Half, what I would like the board to consider is to let me work with our, it's our revenue team, so it's the auditor, controller, treasurer, tax collector, and assessor, to maybe put a guiding or general principle in here about actions that would reduce unfunded liabilities, that type of thing in our guiding principles, because that is something we are always doing as well. So if that's something the rest of you would support, I will work with them to get language to add into the general principles.
Well, I'll ask my colleagues. How do you feel about that? I'm in full support.
Yeah, I'm good with that. And, certain areas like we discussed, PILT is real important to have stabilized proper funding in that area.
Sure, and I do have one question real quick. Obviously, we picked 4 very specific, and I guess we'll keep the rest. We spent a lot of time developing all these, so I'm assuming those will just go underneath the other. I mean, we'll have the 4, right, that we're going to bring to legislators, or we're going to decide plan of action, but I just want to make sure we don't get rid of the list of others, because maybe those are going to come up in a couple of years, and we've already put some time into them. I don't know.
Yeah, I remember, and that was kind of important to me when we talked about this, is that we need to be opportunistic, right. So if legislation comes down to pike that emphasizes or de-emphasizes some of the things that we're talking about here, we want to remain flexible enough to adjust to that. If there's no movement whatsoever on homeowners insurance despite our best efforts, but there is movement in the area of, public contract code or something that might help us get road money, that's kind of where our effort's going to go, and that's the job for Mark and Tracy and her team to make sure that we're aware of that.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is, because I would have just created a list with guiding principles and only your 4 priorities. What I'm hearing is you want to maintain this entire list, we'll clean it up, But then we will probably have, underneath the general principles, we'll list your top 4 priorities, and then we'll have the rest of the remaining items under those categories. Is that what you want?
I don't care how they're
Yes, but you
listed.
want to keep all of them.
The idea is we put time and energy into those, so if it's another tab on an Excel, just have them somewhere that way. If we ever have this conversation again, that we'll know.
Yeah, I think they're.
I don't want to open up the can of worms. I understand what might be going through your mind, but those are our 4. That's what we're doing. That's what when we go to Sacramento, that's what we're going to advocate for. It's just if we could maybe put that on page 2, which isn't shared with the legislators. It's just, am I making sense? It's just, we put time and energy into it, so we
Yeah,
should
but
keep it around.
page 2, I want to have one sheet.
One sheet.
One sheet that we hand. Well, now, it may be two-sided if we expand the general principles and we go into detail about each of the 4. It may end up being two-sided, but I don't want to have any more than that to hand out unless we're engaged in conversation, and we would have in our packet, if we're in some legislator's office and we're talking about something,
All right.
and then it reminds us, we will have in our packet all of
How about
the
this?
work we've done.
This agenda
So-
is saved, the documents are saved, so if we ever need to refer to it, we can. We can do one page or 4. I just want to make sure that like I said, we put time and energy into all these other bullet points,
Yeah.
and they might become very relevant in the near
Yeah,
future.
we should
Yeah,
have
no-
them in our packet, but we wouldn't hand them out automatically. Go ahead, Supervisor Goldenberg.
No, I think Supervisor Campbell's remarks were, spot on. That we've identified 4. We're going to move forward as best we can. But if something just fails for whatever reason, we can't get there, then we're maintaining, the historical information on the rest. And I'm supportive of having a one-page fact sheet for each of these 4, because we're going to address them separately with different members of the legislature as we move forward. They don't necessarily all go together. Sometimes a couple of them would, but sometimes you're just doing one specific. So I think it would be good to have them separated.
Yeah, and the way I see it, the 5 of us should be working on all of this. Our job is to address every single one of these issues, and 10 times as many more that didn't even make it onto this list. What we're doing here is creating a priorities list for the team so that they know, without having to constantly come to board meetings to ask for input, where our priorities lie, so that they can focus their efforts and we can be kind of on the same page as an organization. But in terms of, keeping these things on the list to make sure we keep working on them, PILT and SRS and fire safety, it's not going away, whether we put it off the list or not, so.
Do you have enough to go on there?
Sorry, I opened my mouth.
I like David's idea of having handout sheets if there's one specific thing that you're meeting with a legislator about and it goes into further detail. I like that too. Thanks for bringing that up. All right, with that, I think we are ready to adjourn at 11:24. Is it 11:23? Thank you, everybody.